welcome to the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. I'm DeVita Love, and this is a podcast where we amplify Black women's voices as we discuss ways that we manage stress and maintain our well-being amidst all that's going on in the world. We want to ensure that all Black women live productive, meaningful, and robust lives unhinged by stress. We are excited that you have tuned in and that you're listening to today's episode. So sit back, listen, comment, and let's get into this episode. I am really excited today because I am joined by my twin sister. So this is an extra fun and special episode. As for today's topic, we're really getting into the topic of Black women's wellness after illness and health challenges, and how, what is school psychology and how important it is for our Black girls. So that's what we're going to get into today. DeVita, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm great.
That's good. We're glad you're here. We're really excited you're here. First question that we want to get into, we ask all of our guests is, as a busy professional, you're a school psychologist, how do you make time for your own well-being, your community care, and rest amidst all that you have on your plate?
Great question. So I'll start out by saying I'm new to this current role that I'm in. I started just under a year ago working as a school psychologist again. It's kind of like, I feel like a boomerang almost. I'm kind of going back to where I started professionally. Prior to working as a school psychologist, I worked as a Board Certified Behavioral Analyst for a private behavioral therapy company. And I say that as to answer your question, the reason that I returned to school psychology was to have a better balance of wellness and to be able to manage my stress more effectively. So, one of the things that I do is, like I said, I decided to work at a school. And so my hours are consistent at this point, and I'm home by 3:30 or 4 o'clock. I get out of school by 3:30 and I'm home by about 4:15, and I have the whole afternoon to myself. So usually I spend that time exercising. I walk my dog. I like to do a lot of cooking. And then I watch a lot of TV too. So those are the things that I do to really maintain my wellness. I'm sure we're going to get to this later on in the podcast episode, but I had a lot more difficulty doing that prior to starting as a school psychologist.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. So let's take it back a little bit. And it's great that you mentioned you watch TV and shows to just, de-stress and your own self-care. But what is a school psychologist, and why is this role important, especially for our Black girls, our students, because we know Black students are disciplined by their educators at much higher rates than their white students. And so how is the role of a school psychologist really crucial to Black girls' wellness, who Black girls turn into Black women?
Absolutely. So a school psychologist is a psychologist who works primarily in the school system, hence the name. But primarily what the role is we work as multifaceted kind of approach to supporting students and teachers and families. And so what that looks like is traditionally the role of school psychologist is to provide testing and identification for special education. So that is one facet that's depending on the school where you are, that could be 50, 75% of your role. In some places, it's as low as 10 to 25% of your role. And so a lot of it is that testing component. In some schools, whereas my school, I do a lot of counseling. So I do some counseling with students, do some small groups with kids, and then also parent and teacher collaboration and consultation. So if a teacher has a concern about a few students in the classroom, they may come to me and say, hey, I have a few students who are struggling with, calling out in class, or I have a few students who are having difficulty completing their work assignments and things like that. And so I'll come in and do some consultation with the teacher, get some background information, maybe check in with the parent or the student and see if we can come up with a solution.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. How does that work with the parents per se? Because it just sounds like that, parents can be really defensive and protective of their children, not wanting to hear professionals view of their child. So how does that dynamic work?
Great question. I think it depends on your population, and it depends on, it's so multifaceted. I will say that, unfortunately, it's a good and a bad thing. But as a result from the pandemic, I think a lot more families are open to hearing from other people in my role, so school psychologists and even their teachers, just hearing more about their mental health and their general overall social emotional well-being. So I haven't experienced many issues with communicating with families. In fact, families actually reach out and are often the ones looking for support. They're looking for myself and others in roles similar to mine to provide continuous support.
Okay, that's helpful to hear. And then specifically, how do you think Black girls are benefiting from the support of you as a school psychologist?
I think it's, again, I just think it's really important to see representation where you go to school. So, it's something that, as we both know growing up, we didn't see a lot of people that looked like us as our teachers and professors, even, especially in our grad school. We both went to PWIs for grad school. It was very rare to see those kinds of, faces that look like ourselves in those environments. So I try to always bring that every day when I'm at school and when I'm thinking about the students that I'm working with, is one, just that general exposure, and then really just trying to be present with them. So making sure that I'm speaking to them, even if these are students that aren't on my caseload. I think it's important just so that they have a name to a face, that I'm not just this other person in the building, that they know, hey, Miss Love is someone that they can come and chat with, that I'm, someone that they can come and talk to, because not only is it important for them to see me, but it's also important for them to know that they can reach out, and that I'm not just another person in the building, but that I'm a person in the building that they can come and talk to and be a resource if they need some support.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. That's really helpful. And I know we're, hampering on this, but our education system it's been under attack for decades, but I think especially during this pandemic, it has been incredibly challenging for our educators. How it's just in your role working sometimes alongside the teachers, how does that work? Because you're seeing all the stress that they have and the unrealistic expectation put upon them and how they're devalued and not supported. How do you manage seeing all this? But your role, it's probably, outside of scope. There's only so much you can do because the education system is incredibly bureaucratic. So how do you contend with that?
That's a great question. So there was this wonderful, I'm not sure if you've seen Abbott Elementary yet.
Yes.
But there was this, so there's this wonderful episode. I believe it's either the first or the second episode in the second season, where the main character, I forget the character's name, but Quinta, her character is a teacher, and she's mentoring another new teacher. And actually, I take it back. It is the mentor teacher. I forget her name.
Oh,
is it
yeah.
Shirley Ralph?
Yeah.
So her character is talking with some of the younger teachers, and they're going through that angst that happens at the beginning of the school year, where you look at all the expectations, like you just mentioned. We have to have this done. The kids need to meet these standards. We have to teach all this curriculum by June with all the days off and all the different things that has to happen. And she says to them, teachers are tasked with doing the impossible. Our job is to come, do what we can that day, go home, and then move forward the next day. And that spoke to me so well that I try to carry that into my mindset every single day when I go to work. And when there's other teachers who are feeling stressed, I tell them about Abbott Elementary for one, but then I remind them of that line that she said, because that really spoke to me. And I realized, like you just said, we're asked to do the impossible. And I'm not even a classroom teacher. And I just feel like everyone in the school building is asked to do the impossible with our students. And I work at a well-funded school. So I can only imagine schools that aren't well-funded, how much more they feel that they're asked to do the impossible. But I just try to remind myself, you know what? If I know that I'm putting 110% in my work every single day, that's all that I can do.
Yeah, that's good. And you've worked at some of those underfunded schools previously.
Yes.
So you do have that experience. That's a really great point. And I know we're articulating it so easily, but in the moments, it's really that it's challenging. You bring up a great point. So then how do you, in your personal life, and you alluded to it with cooking, walking your dog, exercising, watching shows like Abbott, but how do you create those boundaries so you're not transferring that stress so that you're not, because it gets easy as educators who are public servants who are really, not in it for the money or really in it for to see the next generation excel. How do you not let that really get to you?
It's hard. I mean, I can't speak for all educators and all people in the field, but it's something that does get to you. Like you just said, we didn't go into this career field to make money. Like we go into it because we care about kids. We go into it because we want to see, I know I've gone into it because I see the struggles that teachers are having. I see the struggles that families and kids are having. And, I love working with kids. I love working with families and schools. So, it's was the right fit for me. I guess to answer your question, I think I always try to think about, sorry, you can hear my dog whining in the background.
It's okay.
I'll try to hush him. But to answer your question, I think I always try to think about what is the reason that I'm here? And, you're just remind yourself, like, you're going to have tough days. I had a really, really tough day like 2 weeks ago. It was a really tough Monday. I walked in, I had a doctor's appointment. Then I came to school, was hoping to just sit and have some lunch and then, get some work done. Kid came in literally as I was walking through the door. I got a text message that a student needed me and was like escalated. And I spent the entire day working with this student. And it was just a really, really stressful day. But I was able to kind of come home and do some of those things. I exercised, I ate some food, watched some TV, and then I was able to come back for the rest of the week. And he had a much better week the rest of the week. And so it's just one of those, like, you're going to have a tough day. You just kind of have to accept it. Acknowledge it's going to be a tough day some days, and then just think about those days when you have positive experiences. You really have to kind of hold on to that.
Yeah. You sound very just well adjusted, like very much, very pragmatic. This is what it is. I'm not disillusioned to education. I knew what I was getting into. You're very clear. But what were you like at the beginning of your career? I mean, because did you have that same approach at the beginning, or has this been, you've learned over the years, really fine tuning your expertise in your profession?
That's a good question. I don't know, honestly. I think part of it is my personality. I think I have a personality where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to roll with the punches. Things are going to happen and you just kind of have to work with it. I think by nature, I'm a fairly flexible person in that sense. So I think that lends itself to this field and just the challenges that it presents. But I will say definitely with experience. And as I mentioned before, after working for a private company for so many years where I didn't have the flexibility, where I didn't have the ability to have a better work-life balance. I think I came in with my eyes open, knowing that the educational system is not where it should be. But at a minimum, it provides people with good, or at least better. I won't say the best, because it's Christmas vacation or winter break for a lot of people. And I guarantee you have teachers who are doing some lesson planning, or you have other professionals who are writing reports and things like that, which is what I plan on doing for some of my time off. So I won't say it's full work-life balance, but it's much better than it was in other companies.
Okay. And I want to get to a point of what you're saying is, I think a lot of people have seen, oh, there's your doggy. A lot of people have seen on social media, and I don't know their names, unfortunately, but the Black students that have either been expelled, that have been, what do they call it? The school resource officers, which I didn't know. That's the school police, this little manufactured term. And you're seeing that they're expelled, they're disciplined at just really high rates. How, are you seeing that in the school, and how are the teachers treating their Black students, and specifically Black girl students?
Great question. So definitely, I used to work at a high school for Black and brown students. And, you saw a high suspension rate. You saw, they had at least one SRO, a student resource officer, who was stationed at the school. And so, we have situations like that. There are some things in place that I assume are in place because of like different lawsuits and things like that to support, to try and reduce those kind of inequities and those gaps within discipline. But it's just one of those things. Prevention is always the best medicine. So I always say, or my thought process behind a lot of what I do is the more visible I am, the more that teachers and families and the students know that myself, and not just myself, other people who are school psychologists, there's educators and things that I work with. We've had these same conversations. Just the more that we can let people know who we are, maybe they can come to us as a resource before their student gets to a point where they're thinking about suspending, or they're thinking about expelling, or they're thinking about doing those other forms of punishment that would happen. I'm fortunate to be at a school where I won't say it doesn't happen, but they are way more cognizant of those kinds of things. And they definitely really, really try to be mindful and, I think more focused on what can we do restoratively, or what can we do to prevent those kinds of occurrences of discipline and things like that from happening. I work in elementary school, so, suspensions and expulsions are a lot more rare in elementary schools. But one thing I know that has been helpful is just the focus on prevention. So, as I mentioned, really making sure, Black and all of our students, but Black and brown students especially, know my face. And that when I come up to them, it's not because they're in trouble. I'm just saying, hey, how was your day? Or, hey, your hair looks really cute today. Or, I love your dress. Or, what did you do over the weekend? Those kinds of things. So that way they know that, whenever they come to see me, it's not just because of a bad thing. I may just want to have a conversation, or they can just have a conversation with me. So that way, having that open relationship when there is an issue, and when we've had, those times, they're coming to me, but they have prior background of positive experiences. So if there is a negative or not as fun of an experience, then it shouldn't outweigh all the positive experiences we've had prior.
Yeah. No, you're saying a lot there. Wow. Because you're saying a lot, because I love what you're saying about prevention, and you're in an elementary school system, so it's a little bit different. But I just, pragmatically, I love prevention, but we see all of these cases in media where it seems as if there was no preventative measures. So Absolutely. Are those instances where there's no counterpart like you, a school psychologist in place, where there's no, I'm curious what leads to all of these national, examples in the education system that we see, because it almost seems paradoxical to what you're just saying.
Absolutely. I think, a lot of it is so, to answer one of your questions first, every school should have an assigned school psychologist. That does not mean a dedicated school psychologist. Many school systems do not have the funding that my school system has. And so they may not have and also there's a shortage of school psychologists everywhere. So, ratios are often, sometimes it's 2 schools to 1 or 3 to 1. It just really depends. I'm fortunate to be at my school 5 days a week. So I'm full time at the one school, but a lot of other school systems don't have that luxury. So they may not have someone who has that experience, or who has that background, or even has the mindset of trying to prevent. So you are completely correct about that. Unfortunately, though, I think it's a systemic system thing, and not just the education system. I think it's a whole District of Columbia focuses on the whole child, and I think other school systems should take that approach. Is because you can't just look at just education and try to solve the inequities and the imbalances by looking just at education. You have to look at what's going on in home life, because they're going to carry all that over into school. You have to look at what resources and services are they being provided with outside of school, because those are the kind of things that are going to support and reduce the suspension rate. It's not a short-term solution. Nothing is short-term. It's going to take several years, maybe even decades or generations to really, if we really want to have an impact and solve it. It sounds fatalistic, I guess, maybe to say that, but it's a long-term solution. It's not a short-term. I think in the short term, things like restorative justice is starting to be implemented across the country. There are programs and things that parents can do to kind of, I guess, I don't want to use the word fight it, but if you find that your child has been suspended or expelled or has been disciplined and you feel that there might be some inequities, find a counselor, find a school psychologist. Again, every school has to be assigned one at least. And there are different policies that you might be able to look into to either get it rescinded or at least to see if they followed the different policies. And just to add a quick note, there's several things that should have been done before suspension and expulsion happens. There's behavior assessments that should be looked at. There should be eyes and ears. If there's a student that's headed towards suspension and expulsion, they should have many eyes and ears on them, analyzing, why are we seeing this behavior? What supports have been put in place? We don't want to have, it's just like a lot of other things that we do in other areas of our lives. Like we wouldn't go automatically to surgery if we're presented with an issue, a health-related issue. We might see, can diet and exercise fix this? Can we do some of these other things before we take in a really extreme approach?
That's helpful. It's making me think of, Amanda Seales in her podcast, Small Doses. She's been highlighting several episodes, a segment on educators and what you're talking about. She's had different educators throughout the entire spectrum of education on and talking about, aspects. And this is just reminding me of some of those discussions. And you're given a really good understanding. I mean, it's the long game. It's not the short term, because it's taken many years for us to get here. It will take many more years to really, change it and address it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And so let's shift here a little bit. You mentioned this in one of your answers that, the day that you had that bad day, you had a doctor's appointment and you just wanted to come in, eat lunch, and then just kind of ease into your work, but you were immediately accosted and it's like, okay, you got to support a child that's in crises, and the whole day is what you spent really helping. So let's talk about that. You recently, amidst all that you've talked about with the challenges in education, you had your own health challenges, like serious health challenges. And, you're in recovery and have had, intermittent health flares. But with that, can you tell us, how did you, through these emergency challenges, really reshift your thinking, a paradigm shift of your health and your wellness amidst these unexpected emergencies that you experienced?
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, it's one of those things that, you start at, I've been in the field of education working with kids for a really long time. And I think when you work in this field, and it's not exclusive to my field, but I'm speaking from my experience, you tend to put yourself last. Mm-hmm. And so, I think the recent health challenges and, getting to what they are, really struggled with severe anemia or iron deficient anemia. And so that causes severe fatigue, muscle aches. It also is linked to anxiety and depression and lots of other kinds of things. And so I really struggled with that over the years without, I don't even want to say it's not been formally diagnosed. I knew I've been I knew I was anemic. A lot of people are anemic, especially Black women. But it's one of those things that's not talked about. You don't hear that you could go to the hospital because of anemia. You never hear that, you can be bedridden basically for over a month because of anemia. So those are kind of things that I wasn't made aware of, or that I didn't know could happen as a result. And I think, honestly, I realized, like, after spending so many years not paying attention to my health, other than knowing I needed to lose some weight and exercise, I thought, hey, I'm on this path. I'm working with kids. I'm doing this great thing. I thought I was taking care of myself. And, it turns out, like, you really do have to be intentional about, hey, some work may not get done. I used to be very much, I have to keep working until the work is done. And, hate to be like that, blunt like that, but I am not paid to work myself till the work is done. I'm paid to work a 40-hour work week, maybe 50, depending on, the circumstances. And the work that needs to be done, if I'm working my hardest in those 40 hours, then that's what I'm doing. I'm not working 60 hours, but being paid for 40 hours. That doesn't help my mental health status. That doesn't help my health status. And then in turn, as a business, that doesn't help your business, because as I learned, I was out for 6 to 8 weeks because of my health situation. And that didn't help my boss. That didn't help the company that I was out. And so, that is why I take the approach that I take now is, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make sure the work gets done, but it may take longer because I'm going to do my set hours. I'm going to work within the specific time frame because my health is important. My needs are important and things like that.
Yes. Yeah. That's wonderful. I mean, you're advocating for yourself. You're saying that I am intrinsically committed to the children and the students and the families and wanting to give it my all. And I cannot allow my health to be last. As you said, the health scare, having to be rushed to the hospital twice, that really, it sounds like just changed a lot in you. Because I remember seeing you over those years working multiple jobs, just years and years
it used
and
to
years.
It was the family joke. Like I was always at work. I think I had 3, maybe 4 jobs at one point. And, some of it, and it wasn't even like, I'm not going to say I didn't need the money. Money is always helpful to pay off debt and things like that. But it wasn't even, I enjoy working. I enjoy working with kids. I love what I do. So I would, opportunities come in and I was like, hey, I'll do them. Why not? And then it wasn't until, a couple years ago, honestly, right before the pandemic, pandemic time switches everything up. But it wasn't until like right before the pandemic that I realized like, hey, I'm starting to get tired. Yeah. And, kind of like hindsight being 2020, I realized that was probably just the signs of the iron deficiency that I wasn't really aware of, because I noticed like, I'm really tired. I'm like, why am I so tired all the time? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Now I'm a ravenous coffee drinker, and that's partly also because of the anemia. I don't need it quite as much as probably I needed it when I was more acutely iron deficient. But it's one of those things, like there's all of these, confounding kind of things that I've now like gotten to the point where like, hey, I really need to pay attention to that. Yeah. One thing like you were mentioning before, like when I said I took that time off for a doctor's appointment, even things like that. And again, it's a work in progress. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. I still have to remind myself, DeVita, that's why you have days off. Like take your time off for a doctor's appointment. I can't sit here and say, oh, I guess I'll wait till Christmas break to make this doctor's appointment, or I'll wait till, whatever weekend or after school or something. No, if the doctor has an 8 a.m. appointment available, I'm going to take that 8 a.m. appointment and I'll just come into work a little bit later because my health is important.
Right. And let's step back, because you made a great point that I think most of us are unaware. Like you said, it's pretty ubiquitous. You hear, oh, you're anemic, you're iron deficient. But what you had that sent you to the hospital is a specific type. I think you said severe. Say that again, DeVita. Severe iron
deficient anemia.
Oh,
they need a better name for it, but IDA, it's iron deficient anemia.
Okay, gotcha. Iron deficient anemia, which, as I remember, me as a caretaker for you and seeing you, that it's a very severe, it's not just, oh, you're anemic, you're cold all the time, you chew on ice, because we really minimize that. I think a lot of us as Black women, but what you had was you were rushed to the ER, you could not move, you could not function, and it almost acts or it presents as if it's an autoimmune disease, almost like a lupus, where it physiologically affects everyone in a different way.
Yeah, some people actually consider iron deficiency anemia to be an autoimmune. It isn't actually an autoimmune disease, but it's very, like you just said, similar in presentation, in that, it's a result of not having enough iron in your blood. And iron is one of those minerals that is so, so important, and it impacts every bone and organ and all that kind of stuff in your body. That's why your hands get cold, because your body is going to prioritize warming the center, the core of your body. So that's why your hands and your feet are often the first sign of iron deficiency, because they're going to be cold, or they're going to, because your blood is filtering all of that warmth and the little bit of iron that you have left into your other parts of your body. A lot of people also experience lots of hair loss and things like that. I didn't experience hair loss as far as I can tell. Part of it's because I have locks, so, all my hair, I'm not touching my hair as much. So some of the other symptoms are like, again, fatigue, muscle cramps is a big one. Anxiety attacks. A lot of people with anemia suffer from anxiety attacks. And as you know, I had several pretty substantial anxiety attacks, which I now know, now that I have a lot more iron in my system, I'm able to handle. There's still some anxiety, and I think I do just in general have challenges with anxiety, but they're much more manageable. And I can now tell the difference that my anxiety related to the iron was much more acute, and it was very more acute and intense, when now it's like just, the standard like thoughts, negative thoughts and things like that I need to work through.
Yeah. And what do you think? And I appreciate you, DeVita, sharing so candidly, because this is really going to be elucidating for our listeners. Iron deficiency anemia is not talked about. And I don't think doctors diagnose it. I don't think they treat it because, like you said, the presentation is very different in everyone. I mean, this is really going to be central. And as you mentioned, one of the symptoms is, you talked about the acute anxiety attacks. Given the thinking about 2022, we have had the national average for death by suicide and depression, anxiety, all of these really challenging behavioral health have skyrocketed. They're incredibly high, and what I'm hearing from you is you were in a sense forced to prioritize your health. Not that you weren't doing it before, I don't want to minimize, but it catapulted you into really, I have to focus on this. What would you say for maybe other Black women? Because I think if I understand iron deficiency anemia, IDA, it's higher in Black women than the general population,
I'm not sure. I'll have to double check. I would think so because there's so many different causes of anemia, but especially iron deficient anemia. One of the main causes is heavy bleeding, and usually that's as a result of fibroids. And so, and we know fibroids are more common in Black women. So I think that you're probably correct about that stat, but I just don't know how certain that is. But I'm sorry. I think I forgot the other part of your question.
Yeah, no, it was a complex question, but just the rise in 2022 of behavioral health challenges and what you've learned from this experience. How do you think Black women can, if we're you talked about previously prevention from a school psychologist lens, how do you think we can apply that to this and preventing some of these? You had really extreme, anxiety attacks and the challenges that sent you to the emergency room. How do you think Black women can prevent this, given that it is really not, I don't want to say not treated, but it's not diagnosed?
Yeah. So one thing is going to the doctor, getting checkups, getting blood work, understanding what common blood work stands for. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what any of those acronyms and any of those words meant before all this stuff happened. I would get blood work done. I went to the doctor very consistently. I always did my physicals, but I didn't pay attention. I didn't look at the numbers to see what any of those mean. Mm-hmm. As you know now, like I study those. I look at LabCorp every single time I get some new blood work or something, mm-hmm. and I say, okay, what does this numbers mean? I'm even at the point now where I've started to ask the doctor, hey, I need you to run an iron panel. I need you to run a vitamin D panel. Mm-hmm. All these kind of things. Because it's important for you have to be in charge. I never understood that until now. You have to be in charge of your own health. You literally have to be your own healthcare worker and your own doctor and manage your health. Not that there aren't great doctors out there, but you have to be in charge of you because you know your body best. Yeah. Oddly enough, before all this situation happened, I want to say this happened in mid-November, a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. I had gone for my physical. Like it was, I want to say like end of October, early November, or something like that. Like maybe 2 weeks before all this happened, I had gone for my physical. And, the doctor, of course, what are the symptoms? What's wrong? And, I'm just like, oh, I feel tired, like really tired. And I was just like, I'm just tired. And I'm like, I drink coffee, I do my job. And, so it was one of those like, I'm tired, I'm brushing it off, those kinds of things. But it wasn't until, like I said, 2 weeks later, I had the situation happen. And then I realized what all of these things were that now I can go into the doctor and say, I need you to check this. I'm feeling this way. I need you to check this. I'm feeling this way. Things like that. And to, back to your question about what can we do to prevent, as I said, checking those blood panels, knowing what to ask for when you go to the doctor. Also, people need to be on supplements. I would at least say, check with your doctor and my healthcare provider. But, I think especially Black women who are having periods, especially if you're having heavy periods, you need to be taking some form of iron every day. Google has been a wonderful tool about thinking about iron. If you have really significantly heavy periods, please speak to an OBGYN, talk with them, get some more information about what your options are. I had a procedure done in February of this year, which has been super, super helpful. Uterine fibroid embolization, which helped to knock down a lot of that bleeding. So I'm not having nearly as heavy bleeding as it was before. A lot of, several of, I'm sure as well, Black people or women really struggle with heavy periods and we'll cancel plans. Well, one thing that I read in Google, if you have to cancel a plan because of your period, something is wrong. You should not have to cancel your plans because of periods. And I've learned now that my periods, they're still a little heavy, but they're not nearly as heavy. I don't have to cancel plans anymore. I don't have to say, oh, I'm feeling this kind of way, I can't do this. Before I was like that. I was like, this is a heavy day, number, whatever. I won't be able to do this. You shouldn't have to do any of that. And that is something that unfortunately I dealt with for many years. And the doctor explained that's probably why you're having these issues, is that I was just severely, bleeding and my body wasn't able to recoup the amount of iron that I needed to make up for that loss.
Wow, this is wonderful. And this is really helpful because we're bringing up, we've pivoted from education and school psychology, but it's all interconnected, the intersectionality, talking about the IDA, iron deficiency anemia. And then you were talking about the uterine fibroids, which, is it the chicken or the egg? Does the uterine fibroids cause the iron deficiency anemia, or is it, I don't know. I'm not a health professional, so I don't want to.
There's actually, I don't know if that was your question, but there's actually some conversations going on about that. Some people have found once they've gotten their iron deficiency, once it's no longer a deficiency, they've noticed, even without having a procedure that I had, some people have noticed that their periods have gotten better, which leads to that conversation. Like some people have found that when they've had more iron, then they bleed less, and then vice versa. But it's like, how do you bleed less when you're losing so much? It's such a cycle. Right. It is really, really difficult to kind of like tease out between that. Now, I do want to note that's not the only way you can get an iron. You can have iron deficiency. A lot of pregnant women have iron deficiency as well, because the baby is also using the nutrients. There's other forms. A lot of people who have like surgeries, like bypass, especially like gastric bypass and things like that, because they're not getting enough the same amount of nutrients that they were getting prior to that procedure. They're at risk for an iron deficiency. People who have a lot of GI difficulties like Crohn's and IBS and things like that also are more prone to having low iron because their body is not absorbing the iron. It's so, like, again, doing all this research that I would not have known, prior to everything that happened, just learning that there's so many ways. And I was doing all those things. Iron is inhibited by calcium. So you can't really have a lot of iron with calcium, but iron is better absorbed when you have it with vitamin C. So things like just those kind of common things. And then also knowing, again, food quality is super, super important. You get a lot of iron through spinach, but it has to be cooked spinach. But then also it needs to have some vitamin C with it. It's just all these different components that, the simplest thing for me was to get it through supplements, because you're just never going to be able to have enough. Even if you're eating a fully healthy diet, you're not going to be able to get enough vitamins to supplement the iron that you should get, especially if you're already deficient.
Right. So just to clarify, when you mentioned iron deficient, and then you also said iron deficiency anemia, are those synonyms or are those two separate? Because I guess I just want to really be clear for the listeners. I mean, your iron deficiency anemia, we had to call the ambulance. Like it was, because a lot of people, I'm iron deficient. Are those the synonyms or?
People will say them interchangeably. So I often say them interchangeably, but they actually are not. Okay. So iron deficiency anemia is the lowest of the low, which is what I was. Okay. The doctor let me know, like if my iron had dropped much lower, I would have needed blood transfusions. I would have needed to have been like fully hospitalized and remained there until, I caught up a little bit. But there's iron deficiency anemia. Then there's also just plain anemia. And then there's being iron deficient. So there's several different categories. I would suggest Googling them. I don't know what the numbers are at this point, because it's been a little bit of time since I've done that research, but there are different levels. It mostly revolves around what your iron levels are. If your iron levels are at a certain low, at a certain point, which is the lowest of the low, that's when you're iron deficient anemia.
I see. Okay.
And then some of the other ones where you have some iron, but you just don't have enough.
Okay. That's really helpful. And I think I would I think we would love to hear, how did you maintain your hope, your joy, your optimism amidst this? Because you had many providers that were just brushing you off. I mean, you went to multiple specialists. You went to OBGYN, you went to cardiologist, you went to, of course, your primary care physician, you went to hematologist, you went to the oncology hematologist, like you went through the many. And you also went through a registered dietitian, nutritionist for all of this nutritional, and all of them, I can say, and want to hear your thoughts, we're just minimizing, we're dismissive, we're not really, you had to keep fighting and pounding the pavement, doing your own research. And I know a lot of people like to vilify Dr. Google. In this instance, Google saved your life. Like all of those cadre of providers were not giving you any of this education and specificity. And I think this is an example where we don't need to demonize Google, because in this instance, you going off on your Google rabbit holes gave you the power of the knowledge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're so right. Like I now really am frustrated by that Dr. Google term, because like I just said, like, by no means does Google solve everything. Of course, you need to speak with a professional healthcare provider who knows more than what Google would know, from the standpoint that everybody has a specific different body chemistry. There's bio-individuality for every single person. So a doctor is going to best be able to synthesize all that information. But you're right. I had such a hard time getting even basic information. I can go back even to being in the ER. In the ER, I thought the symptoms of a severe iron deficient anemia kind of like episode, and not everyone has an episode, but many people do. It was very similar to the symptoms of a heart attack. I thought I was having a heart attack. Turns out it was possibly a combination of an iron deficient anemia kind of episode and panic attack at the same time, which is very, very similar to a heart attack. I literally thought I was going to die. There were several times that I thought I was dying. And you were there. I was very much concerned, like, hey, but then going through the research, it wasn't until I went through Google, because I asked doctors these questions, and many doctors were like, oh, you shouldn't have had that. You shouldn't have had that feeling. But I did have that feeling. Like, I was at an answer. And the answer was, oh, you shouldn't have felt that way. People don't usually feel that way. Well, that doesn't help, because I felt that way, and you're not giving me any answers. So I had to resort to Google, because I wasn't getting any of these answers. And I went, we have a family history of cardiac disease and cardiovascular challenges. So I was very much concerned, because I thought I was having a heart attack. Like, let me check my heart, make sure I'm not suffering with those kinds of things. And it turns out, thankfully, it was not that. To your question, I think you were asking how did I kind of get through that? A lot of it was with family. Obviously, first and foremost, it was with God. I'm a believer. I believe in Jesus, and the Lord as my Savior. And I really found my faith to be super helpful. At that point, I spent so much time, praying and just talking to God, and just trying to make sense out of a lot of this stuff. And it's one of those things, like, it takes time, but you really do hear things. And I really kind of felt that I heard from God. And not an audible way, but just felt his comfort and felt his love and felt his support, even in those really, really trying times. And so, I definitely feel like, you being there, and my brother-in-law being there, and my other family members being there, I felt that support, and wonderful friend support as well, just getting that support. And then, like I said, through God, like, it was tough. It was really, really tough for a while there. But, I think with all of the support that I was getting, and then taking the time, one thing, again, I do have anxiety. So one thing for my anxiety that's helpful is doing research. So the more I could learn about being anemic, and the more I could learn about the different challenges that I was struggling, it helped me to realize that I was not the only one having these same symptoms. I was not the only one dealing with the same thing, and getting the same response from doctors, like, oh, why are you? That has nothing to do with anxiety. Deal with that elsewhere. Like, no, being anemic can cause anxiety. Being anemic can cause one of the symptoms that people don't talk about enough is chest pain. A lot of people who have iron deficient anemia, or have iron deficiency anemia, are struggle with chest pain. They have a lot of these kind of symptoms. And unfortunately, chest pain, one, is synonymous with heart attacks, but it's also synonymous with panic attacks. It's also synonymous with
anxiety.
There was acid reflux, which I also have. So it's one of those things, like, is it one of those four? Is it all
Right.
of those four?
Right.
There's so many different things that,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until I kind of got some more research and, joined some different Facebook groups just to get that, like, to be in community with other people who are dealing with the same thing is when I realized, like, oh, these are some things that I can do. These are some
Mm.
supports that I can look at. Listening to podcasts became really, really helpful for me. I couldn't really do much else other than watch TV when I was bedridden. And so listening to podcasts, doing that research, all of those things really helped me to see, okay, DeVita, one, you can make it through. And these are some things that you can do to support you once you are out of that acute phase to manage this thing long term.
Right. So it sounds like, so is this iron deficiency anemia, this is a chronic condition that you'll experience through the life course? Like, is it treatable completely?
It is,
Or
yeah, it's
curable?
treatable.
Sorry, I should say.
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, honestly. Like, I think yes and no. It's treatable in the sense, I'm sorry, it's curable in the sense that once your iron levels are back caught up, you should experience less symptoms. Okay. Now, it's one of those things. It's just like you've adopted a dog recently. It's just like if you have a dog or like someone who's not, like, if you're not used to having food, your body is the same way. Like, if your body's not used to having something, it's gonna take it a while to register that it has enough of it. So, for example, like, once you start taking iron supplements, or I had to get infusions. Once you get the infusions, it's going to take your body at least 4 weeks to register that it has the iron that it needs. But even then, your body is going to conserve it. So it's going to, store it up. So you may still not have enough of your iron in your reserves. So you really just want to build up that surplus. Again, I say that to say it may take a while, but ideally, once you've, gotten a surplus of iron, you can, your goal is to then maintain that surplus. So it's curable if you can maintain the surplus of iron. And you want to be mindful. There is, you can hit the max and have too much iron. It's a lot harder. If you're iron deficient, anemic, then it's unlikely that will happen, but it is possible. So you don't want to have too much iron in your system. But so I guess to answer your question, it is curable once you figure out what the root cause is. That's the other key thing. Right. Iron deficiency anemia is, I think it's called like a secondary cause, or like it's a secondary something. There's a name for it because it's usually caused by something else. So my iron deficiency was caused by my fibroids through heavy bleeding. Others, again, it might be through IBS or Crohn's or something like that. So you want to figure out what is causing the bleeding. And why aren't you absorbing the iron at the rate that you need to absorb it? Once you can cure or fix that situation, then you should be able to cure the deficiency.
Okay. And how are you now? How are you feeling? How are your iron levels? Just how are you feeling now?
I think I'm doing pretty good. I mean, honestly, it's one of those things. Like I said, you have to get tested. I try to get my blood levels checked between every 3 months and every 6 months.
Okay.
For a couple different things, but I try to get my blood levels checked at least between every 3 and 6 months to specifically look at my iron status. I've been meeting with the hematologist, and so we're on a plan every 6 months to get an extra dose of iron. Okay. So we'll determine whether that's continued. I'm continuing to need that much iron. I feel a lot better. I'm no longer feeling as tired as I was before. I'm sure this is a topic for another podcast, but there's other vitamin deficiencies and mineral deficiencies that can cause the similar symptoms. So again, it's really multifaceted. I'm also, which the majority of the population is, vitamin D deficient. That can also cause the similar kind of, symptoms. People with magnesium deficiency can have the similar kind of symptoms. So that's again why I'm saying it's super important to get your blood checked, get these levels checked, because these are kinds of things that it's not going to just come up on your typical physical screening. You need to ask for it, but it's super beneficial.
Right. And it sounds like what you're saying is also really leading your care. You went to 6 different specialists that did not coordinate your care. The 6 didn't know what each other were doing. And then you compound that you're a Black woman, so they weren't trying to listen to you. They didn't want to hear what you had to say. And you said, okay, like you said, I'm going to be my healthcare worker and I'm going to get my research, because we could have still been waiting for all of those specialists. We would still be.
And to kind of jump in there, another thing that was important is, as you said, they're dismissive. But another thing, one, they're dismissive about being a Black woman, but also age. And it's funny because, I may not feel young, but apparently in healthcare, we're still young considered. And so the common refrain is, you're too young to have heart disease. You're too young. And we know that that's not the case. People are having heart attacks and all these challenges at our age and younger. There was a news reporter who actually just died at 37 of a massive heart attack. I just heard on the news. And it's one of these things, people are always saying, oh, you're too young to have that. We're not.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
I'm not. Full stop.
Right.
I'm not. So, stop making it sound like if I'm telling you I'm having these symptoms, which I am, then you need to check. And then, prayerfully, I won't have any of these symptoms, but I'd rather know. So.
And so, as we're ending this amazing discussion, I mean, we could have 2 other podcasts. We combined it, the school psychology education with your own health challenges to show that Black women, our wellness is infinite. We are multifaceted. It's not going to be boxed in. But what would you like to close with our to share with our listeners? Just closing words, advice, what you've learned from this experience, how it seems like you're really empowered and emboldened. Just final thoughts.
So, I would say my final thoughts are, 1, get your blood checked. Make sure you know your levels and whatever. It may not be iron if you don't struggle with that. It might be other things. Make sure you're checking those things. Really make an action plan to work on whatever you're going to work on, whatever you need to work on based on that information. Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to cure or treat whatever issue you're struggling with in one day. That's something I continue to try to remind myself, that it's not a quick fix. This is a long haul kind of a thing, and you need to continue to work on it. Habits don't change overnight, and you have to give yourself grace. I would say that's my biggest takeaway from just 2022, and just is continuing to, 1, give myself grace, because I spent a lot of the time once the situation happened. And this actually happened at the end of 2021, I believe, and then went into 2022. This happened in November 2021. But it was a lot of 2022 that I was really struggling with this. But it's just, 1, giving myself grace. I spent a lot of time, because it caused a lot of, I got laid off of my job after the health situation happened. I moved to a different role, and right before, about a month before all of this happened, I had just moved from a home. I sold my home and moved into an apartment complex, and that was a really stressful situation. It's just those things, like, give yourself grace. It's going to take time. I had to remind myself, and I continue to remind myself, that I can't do everything in one day. There's no quick fix for anything, and that I need to be patient with myself and be patient with the process of healing and being well.
Yeah.
I would say educationally, support your educators, support your teachers that you know personally. As you just said, teachers are doing the impossible. I am not a teacher. I am part of the education profession. I'm not a teacher, but educators and teachers and all of people who work with students and kids and things like that are miracle workers, and they need support every single day. And summers are not enough. These holidays are not enough. I think people think that because, they work a certain amount of hours and they're not working a certain time on certain days, that people think that they're not working harder and things like that. We know that they are considered public servants, and public servants are not funded the way that they should be funded. So this is my call. We need to be funding educators the way we're funding doctors and lawyers and all these celebrities and all these professional people who do all these other things. And we'll give these platitudes and say, oh, I support my kid's teacher. I gave them a card. That's wonderful. I'm not saying that's not impactful, but we need to be supporting through legislation. And there's no way that, like, even DC Teachers Union just got a raise. I'm not saying that wasn't helpful. I'm sure it's wonderful, but we all know that they should have gotten at least twice whatever the contract was given should be at least double. And that only barely would scratch the surface. We all know that. And I think that's pretty standard to say. So I think across the country, wherever you are listening to this, find a teacher, support that teacher, give them a gift card to Starbucks, give them a muffin, give them something. And they will, I guarantee you, from someone who just got something from a couple parents, it is so well appreciated and needed. And that's just those small scale things.
Yeah. Oh man, we could have a whole nother episode, because I didn't even get into, you talked about DC that is not just siloed in the student, but it's holistic. I didn't know that in our education system. So that's something that we could have unpacked. You even talked about that you were laid off from your job when you had this health scare. That's a whole nother thing that we can talk about because that's happening to Black women all the time. And then just like you said, supporting our teachers, that DC union, I guess, gave teachers a raise. And like you said, they've been asking for this for decades, so there's so much we can talk about. And this is to show that Black women we are multifaceted and our wellness is infinite. So I appreciate you, DeVita. It's been great having you on this episode, really getting into wellness and health and education system and advocating for yourself and research and not vilifying Google, all these great things. Just as we end here, where can folks find you? I'm sure you've really brought up some topics that many people are going to want to know. Wow, how can I communicate with DeVita? Where can they find you on these interwebs?
Oh, great question. I have a LinkedIn.
Oh, don't say LinkedIn.
I don't know the link.
Oh my God.
I don't know where people can find me, honestly.
Okay, do you have a Twitter or Instagram?
No, I do, but I use those. Those are part of my wellness routine, so I do not use those for communication purposes.
Oh, I respect that.
If they would like to connect with me, I can share my email address, or maybe that can be linked in the show notes, my email address. I'm happy to share that information.
Okay.
And that's where I am at this moment.
Okay, so LinkedIn and email address. And I love it. Your boundaries are, you have IG, but it's for your own wellness, not for folks to reach out to you. I like that. It's wonderful. This is wonderful. Well, thank you, DeVita, for being on today's episode of the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. Continue to listen to our upcoming bi-weekly episodes. Subscribe, follow, like, and connect with us on our website, thebwwa.com. We want to hear from you. So drop those comments. Tell us what resonates for this episode. And we love engaging with you in our community. So feel free to follow us across all of our social media platforms. Our handle, the BWWAINC, THEBWWAINC. This has been great. Thank you, DeVita. And until next time, stay well and remember our wellness is infinite. Talk to you all soon.